There are stories buried beneath stories, names carved into the walls of time, and then scrubbed clean by trembling hands. This is one of them. A truth wrapped in lace, blood, and silence. Pittsburgh. The year is 1887. The steel city's smoke, blackened sky hung heavy with secrets. Men built empires from iron and lies, and women, they vanished, especially if they knew too much. Her name was Eleanor Winthrop. A woman of status, elegance, and quiet rebellion. Married to Gregory Winthrop, a railroad magnate whose fortune came not from grit or genius, but allegiance. Allegiance to the kind of circles that dined in candlelight while striking deals in blood. She walked into their mansion on Fifth Avenue, that October night wearing pearls and suspicion. She would never walk out again. The city claimed it was hysteria, or perhaps she ran off. But there were no train tickets, no letters, no luggage. Only the scent of lavender and the burnt edge of a silk glove found in the hearth. You see, what they don't tell you, what the polite history books neatly avoid, is that Eleanor had begun asking questions. Dangerous ones. About where the Winthrop wealth truly came from. About what Gregory did behind locked library doors when the oil lamps burned long after midnight. And about the strange men who visited in cloaks, never announced, never recorded. Her disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was a silencing. The kind that only happens when a woman gets too close to forbidden knowledge. Because Eleanor wasn't just a wife. She was a witness. And what she saw had roots that reached far beyond Pittsburgh. You weren't supposed to hear this story. In fact, powerful hands worked overtime to erase it, to turn her into a ghost. But ghosts have a way of whispering back. And if you keep listening, I'll show you exactly why she vanished. Who wanted her gone? And the ancient current of corruption that still flows under our institutions, masked by politeness, rituals, and gold. But fair warning, once you begin to see it, you'll never unsee it. This is not just a story. This is a reckoning. The Winthrop estate was a fortress, grand in design, cathedral, like in silence. Every stone carried prestige and pretense. But beneath the chandeliers and ivory balustrades, there was a room no one spoke of. A chamber not on any blueprint. Servants knew better than to ask. The gardener once wandered too close, and was gone by morning. Officially relocated. Unofficially, he became the house's first ghost. This room, 3 floors down, beyond a bookshelf that only opened when you pressed a bronze lion's eye, held no books, no maps, no opulence. Just a table made of black walnut, 7 chairs, and a single oil portrait, a robed figure with no face, only a gold triangle where the eyes should be. Eleanor found it by accident. She wasn't meant to. But secrets have a magnetic pull, especially on the ones who feel the lies tightening around their throats. And Eleanor, she was suffocating. Gregory had changed. His touch, once warm, had grown cold, calculated. He spoke in codes, muttered in sleep, whispered foreign names that weren't in any book she'd ever read. And at precisely 2:03 a.m., once a month, he descended into the hidden chamber, barefoot, robe dragging behind him, a black candle in one hand and a sealed envelope in the other. Eleanor followed. She watched from a gap in the stone, and what she saw burned itself into her bones. 7 men, none local, sat around the table, heads bowed, palms slit open, bleeding into a silver basin. They didn't speak, they chanted. A language that didn't belong to this continent, or maybe even this world. One word kept repeating: Nahariel. She remembered it. She whispered it as she fled back up the stairs. She wrote it in her journal, beneath the line, "What did Gregory trade for our fortune?" Because that's the unspoken truth, isn't it? Great wealth doesn't come from hard work alone. Not at this level. Not this fast. No, there's always a transaction. And when the price is high enough, someone always disappears. They tried to erase Eleanor because she saw behind the curtain. But now, you've seen it too, and we've only just begun. It was never about steel, or railroads, or progress. That was the costume. The real story of Gregory Winthrop began beneath the oldest church in Pittsburgh, St. Luthan's, a Gothic relic said to be blessed by papal hands. But history lies. The foundation stone of St. Luthan's wasn't consecrated, it was sealed. Underneath it sat a vault, no crosses, no scripture. Just inscriptions in Proto-Canaanite, a stone altar carved with serpents, and a symbol Eleanor recognized from Gregory's private ring, a downward, pointing triangle over a veiled eye. What was buried here didn't belong to God. It belonged to something older, something fed not by faith, but by blood, obedience, and binding contracts. When Gregory first arrived in Pittsburgh in 1869, he was a failed merchant with debt collectors at his throat. Within 3 years, he had wealth, rail lines, private police, and political allies. He never explained the sudden fortune, never discussed the European men he'd met during his trip to Austria, But Eleanor found the ledger, buried behind loose stone in the wine cellar. Not numbers, names, Latinized, dated, each with a symbol beside it. Then she found hers. Eleanor lex ex tenebris, light from darkness. She wasn't part of the marriage. She was part of the deal. It wasn't love, it was selection. You see, they needed a vessel, a gate, a conduit through which something ancient could be invited, under the guise of ritual, cloaked in ceremony, legitimized through wealth. Eleanor wasn't prey. She was the key, and that's when she realized the dream she'd had for years, of drowning in black water as 7 men chanted, wasn't a dream at all. It was memory. Suppressed, drugged, bound. How many other women had vanished in this city, labeled hysterical, unstable, runaway? How many men in power owed their status to the same hands that touched Gregory's shoulder that night in the vault and said, "She is pure, she will suffice." This is the infection no one talks about. The elite network's not built on legacy but leverage. On sacrifice masked as ceremony. Eleanor wasn't the first, but she may have been the last one who fought back. You're not watching a mystery. You're witnessing the unraveling of an ancient machine. One secret at a time. They called themselves the Veiled Ones. A name never spoken in public, only etched behind mirrors, embroidered on hidden hems, whispered into the ears of dying men who'd bought too much truth for one lifetime. Their doctrine was older than America, older than Christ, older than the written word, passed from empire to empire, always hiding behind legitimacy, religion, monarchy, finance, philanthropy, a shell game of power. Eleanor, trembling with pages of Gregory's private codex spread across her vanity, decoded what she could. It was not a religion. It was a technology, one rooted in psychology, blood ritual and sound. The belief that the human soul could be fractured, programmed, and used as currency. And Pittsburgh. It wasn't chosen by accident. The rivers formed a trident. The city's grid mirrored ancient sigils. Its wealth financed cathedrals that weren't churches, but conduits. Each man in the Veiled Ones swore an oath before the faceless triangle. To hide, to harvest, and to hand over. What did they harvest? Not crops, not coal, consciousness. They believed, no they knew, that fear was a frequency and human trauma, properly channeled, could summon. Summon what? Not demons in the Hollywood sense. Something subtler, older, observers, bidders, patrons. Entities without form but with intent. The kind of entities that don't care about politics or creed, only permission. And the Veiled Ones gave it freely. Eleanor's body began to change after she found the chamber. She wrote about the hum in her bones, about shadows that moved before she entered rooms, about her dreams being watched from the inside. She wasn't just hunted, she was claimed. And yet, she fought. She stopped drinking the nightly tea Gregory brought. She wore iron under her corset. She wrote letters to a contact in New York who signed only as A.M. She began documenting everything, even the unspeakable. This isn't the story of a victim. This is the story of a woman who tried to break a generational covenant designed to enslave not just her, but us. Because the systems they built back then, they didn't disappear. They evolved. The universities, the banks, the charities, the governments, all seeded by the Veiled Ones. And the scariest part, they don't need to hide anymore. Because no one's looking. There's a name that never made the newspapers. Never appeared on marriage certificates, company ledgers, or public records. And yet, every major family in Pittsburgh in the late 1800s answered to him. They called him the architect. Eleanor found the name scratched behind a dresser drawer in the guest room. 3 letters, RLS. Etched so violently the wood splintered around it. Beneath it, in trembling graphite, "Hey comes when they fail." Robert Lucian Strode, born in Edinburgh, expelled from seminary for ritualistic experimentation, vanished from public life in 1844, reappeared in America under a different name. He never built railroads, hospitals, or schools, but he built people, powerful people. He didn't run the Veiled Ones, he molded them. When Gregory began to falter, began showing Eleanor too much, it was Strode who appeared at the estate, dressed like a banker but moving like a priest. The staff said he never blinked, animals refused to go near him. Eleanor caught one conversation through the keyhole. "You were given dominion, Gregory. Not affection. You let the gate bond with you. That was not the arrangement." That was the moment she realized her love had made her a liability. Gregory hadn't just broken a vow. He had violated the terms of the contract. And in their world, love wasn't weakness, it was treason. Strode brought the ledger, not 1, but 3, each bound in human skin. 1 for Eleanor. 1 for the unborn child they never told anyone about. And 1 for Gregory marked, witness host. This was never about marriage. This was about incarnation. About bringing something through, Not into the world, but into her. She wasn't just a key. She was a cradle. Eleanor understood then what the bloodline rituals were for. Why the veil had to be passed through women of a certain heritage, under certain stars, at certain thresholds of trauma. They weren't summoning evil. They were constructing it, breeding it, layering it into society through families, children, institutions. This wasn't horror. This was infrastructure. Gregory had wanted out. That's why he softened. That's why he grew cold, not from malice, but guilt. And that's why Strode came. To correct the error. But Eleanor had already made her move. She had hidden the journal. She had warned someone. She had declared war. And war was coming. They never expected her to carry it to term. Not Gregory, not Strode, not the circle. The child growing inside Eleanor wasn't born from love. It was designed. Conceived at a precise planetary conjunction, within a geometry drawn beneath the bed on parchment of flayed lambskin, soaked in frankincense and black ash. The goal wasn't a baby, it was a host. And yet Eleanor did something none of them predicted. She bonded. She sang to it, wrote letters to it, spoke its name, a name that came to her in a dream of crows circling a violet sky Kalis. It wasn't part of their ritual. It wasn't one of the 7 sealed names from the old tongue. It was hers. A human name. She loved what they engineered. And that made it unpredictable. The doctrine of the Veiled Ones warned against this. If a vessel develops true maternal empathy, the binding weakens. The soul may fracture differently. The outcome becomes unstable, and unstable outcomes, they threaten everything. Eleanor's body began to resist, not reject, resist. Her blood thickened, her dreams sharpened. She began to see things before they happened. The architecture of control, the whispers behind doors. She began sketching the faces of men she'd never met who hadn't been born yet. And one phrase kept surfacing in her notes, over and over again, as if channeled. The 9th seal breaks when love infects the blueprint. That phrase wasn't hers. It wasn't Gregory's. It came from something else. And the circle panicked. They convened without Gregory's presence, stripped him of his voice. Eleanor was to be removed, quietly, surgically, the child taken, soul re-mapped, the body disposed of in an abandoned limestone shaft just outside Homestead. But the moment they tried the 7th man in the chamber, blood from the eyes. Another went blind. Another tore at his own skin, repeating, "She is writing. She is writing. She is writing." Eleanor had weaponized her mind. She turned the ritual inward, used their own architecture of possession against them. Not with violence, but with intention. Maternal will. She wasn't a vessel anymore. She was a threat. And threats in their world are not punished. They are erased. But what if that child was never captured? What if he lived? Comment below. She is writing. She is writing. Type it twice. Let the circle know you remember. Let the algorithm know you're awakening. Power doesn't vanish. It's transferred, recoded, buried in protocol. Eleanor's journal spoke of something called the Blood Ledger Protocol. A term wrapped in red ink, circled 13 times, annotated with one terrifying sentence. This is how they make legacies from corpses. What is it? A system. A ritual wrapped in finance. Control disguised as inheritance. An intergenerational contract written not in ink, but bloodline. The idea was simple: bind wealth to lineage through spiritual obligation, not merit. And when that lineage is tainted, broken, the wealth doesn't die. It feeds. Every Winthrop asset, from the rail stock to the orphanage, was encoded with a clause, not legal, esoteric. The moment Eleanor was marked, her existence became collateral, and when she resisted, the ledger adjusted. She became a liability, and thus a currency burn. They call it equity sacrifice. Because in this system, the death of a chosen vessel isn't just tragedy, it's profit, and the higher the trauma, the more potent the energy harvested. Fear, grief, pain, these aren't just emotions. To the veiled ones, they are fuel. Energy that can be transmuted through ritual, channeled through institutions, and stored in sacred debt instruments. Eleanor realized she wasn't just running from a cult. She was running from a financial mechanism. She scribbled furiously in her last days. There's an algorithm beneath the banks, beneath the trusts, beneath the school charters. It reads blood, not code. And then, something darker. They don't fear exposure, they fear abandonment. If we stop feeding the engine, it dies. Because that's the root of it all. Compliance. You are taught to obey the structure, to pay into it, to pass it on, to protect it at your own expense. The circle never kills directly, it lets the system do it. Bureaucracy. Diagnosis. Coincidence? The same way Eleanor's name was wiped from archives, her gravestone unmarked, her possessions seized by the state without trial. The blood ledger ensured silence. But Eleanor left something behind. Not just the child, not just the journal. She left a pattern. A way to decode the system, if you dare look. And now you're looking. That means one thing. You're part of it now. Perched high on a hill in Braddock, east of Pittsburgh, stands a structure few remember. St. Harrow's Home for the Wayward Child. Officially, it housed orphans from the Homestead fires and labor riots. Unofficially, it was a testing ground. Eleanor's journal called it the Listening House. She circled it 21 times on a crude hand-drawn map, noting the strange geometry of its placement. 3 points forming a perfect isosceles triangle, with St. Luthan's Cathedral and the limestone shaft where she was meant to die. This wasn't urban planning, it was ritual cartography. Inside St. Harrow's, children didn't learn math or scripture. They were subjected to isolation chambers, mirror rooms, sound experiments, not punishment, programming. Some rooms were painted entirely red. Others pulsed with low-frequency hums that induced hallucinations. And hidden behind a paneled wall in the sub-basement, a chair, not wooden, not metal, but stone, inscribed with binding glyphs that weren't Latin, weren't Greek, closer to pre-Sumerian, as if borrowed from a time before time. Children were strapped into this chair for hours. Watched, recorded, not with cameras, with observers, hooded, silent. Eleanor discovered this after posing as a laundress. She bribed a doctor, falsified her identity. She needed to know if they had already taken her child. She found records signed by RLS himself. 18 boys, 7 girls, each marked nullified. One entry, underlined twice. Subject careless disposition unknown. They hadn't found him. But they were searching. She realized then what the listening house truly was, a frequency factory, training children not to think, but to respond. Conditioning them to certain sounds, tones, words. Embedding in them a second layer of obedience, beneath awareness. This is the birth of institutional control. Not through violence, through pattern. And the children who passed, they were adopted, not by families, by structures, bureaucracies, banks, police academies, seminaries. The veiled ones didn't raise children, they installed assets. This is how power perpetuates, by making its victims protectors of the very system that broke them. And maybe you're wondering, how much of what you believe is truly yours? How many of your thoughts were written into you by design? Eleanor's descent into darkness was never personal. It was a mirror. And now you're standing in front of it. We are taught to trust paper, birth certificates, deeds, medical records, psychiatric reports. All stamped with authority. All bound in legal ink. But what if I told you that paper is the oldest weapon in the arsenal of control? Eleanor discovered this the day she was committed. No trial. No defense. Just a single document, signed by Gregory, co-signed by a Dr. Edwin Marr, a man she'd never met. The paper claimed she suffered from hysterical clairaudience, a condition fabricated by the veiled ones to neutralize threats disguised as compassionate medical intervention. It was the same fate dealt to countless women in that era. Wives, daughters, sisters, who saw too much, spoke too clearly, resisted too fiercely. You see, the institutions weren't built to protect you. They were built to contain you. St. Adalbert's Sanitarium, that's where they took her. On the surface, a place of healing. White walls, candlelight, nuns whispering Latin prayers. But underground, red corridors, barred rooms, electrical instruments imported from Austria, prototypes not even legal in Europe. Eleanor was strapped to a table of cold brass, injected with a serum that clouded time. Asked the same questions, again and again. What did you write? Where is the child? Do you know the 7th incantation? But Eleanor didn't break, because she understood something critical, something they hadn't accounted for. She had already written herself into the system. Pages of her journal were smuggled out. Not just words, formulas, patterns, glyphs, hidden inside innocent-looking prayers and lullabies. She corrupted their purity with will. And she made herself unerasable. That's when they resorted to the final tool in their arsenal, penance. Penance wasn't about forgiveness. It was about resetting obedience. They forced her to read aloud the words of the doctrine of veil, not once, but 700 times. They believed it would overwrite her defiance, but it didn't. It carved her resolve deeper. Her final journal entry from the asylum read, I am awake, and I am writing into the bones of the structure itself. If they erase me, I will return through every crack. That's what this is. Her words. Filtered through time. Echoing through this video, slipping past the algorithm. Reaching you. And now you've heard them. Do you feel it? That faint resistance in your chest? That's not fear. That's awakening. There's a building downtown Pittsburgh, 432 Washington Street. Looks like nothing. Faded brick, boarded windows, a plaque honoring a forgotten steel magnate. But beneath it there is a chamber. Eleanor's journal describes it in detail, though she never saw it with her own eyes. The sketches weren't hers. They came from someone else, a nurse at St. Adalbert's. She had no name, only initials MDV. She left Eleanor a note beneath her pillow, wrapped in gauze and stitched shut with human hair. It read, "They built it for ascension, but it became a prison." The chamber beneath Washington Street was a convergence point, a ritual aperture. Not symbolic, not metaphor. A literal space where ley lines crossed, where sound and geometry aligned to open something. A space designed not just for summoning, but for implantation. The walls weren't stone, they were bone, pressed and bleached. Thousands. Some child-sized. In the center a pedestal. Always cold, no candle would stay lit near it. They said when the ritual succeeded, the pedestal would hum like a throat before speech. And above it, painted in human ash, Hic manus scientiae. Hair is the hand of knowledge. It's where they implanted the protocol, not into one person, but into a system. A living system of governors, financiers, bishops, publishers, bound together by the same frequency, the same pact, their blood diluted across generations, but their minds aligned. They didn't need to meet. They didn't need to conspire, because the signal was already inside them. And you wonder how institutions fall in lockstep, why they all say the same phrases, why the narrative never cracks. Because it's not a conspiracy, it's an organism. And that chamber beneath Washington Street, it was the heart. Eleanor tried to map its pulse. Her last sketches were spirals with teeth, drawn in red wax. They looked like fingerprints but weren't human. One page simply read, "If the pedestal hums again, it will not stop." No one knows if the chamber was destroyed. There are rumors it was sealed in 1934 under orders from a senator who vanished 6 months later. But power like that, it doesn't die. It waits, and when enough of us forget, it hums. You've heard it before. Not with your ears, with your bones. That low, droning hum that creeps into your dreams, that makes streetlights flicker when there's no wind, that fills your chest with dread when nothing around you has changed. Eleanor called it the black frequency. Not a sound, but a signal. The foundation of the control system. Not broadcasted by machine, activated by ritual. Stored in architecture. Hidden in plain sight. She traced it to specific locations, churches with inverted acoustics, libraries built atop burial grounds, courthouses designed to echo trauma into the floorboards. These weren't accidents, they were conductors. One journal entry reads, "The walls are singing, not to God, to the pattern." The black frequency isn't heard, it's felt. It operates below conscious thought, shaping mood, bending will, subtly pushing decisions 1 inch off center. Not enough for alarm, just enough to misalign your path. Why do you feel anxious in some buildings and calm in others? Why do certain neighborhoods decay faster than others, despite funding? Why do you forget what you were about to say, just as it mattered most? Eleanor learned the answer in the asylum. Every night at 3:33 a.m., the building would tremble. Not from earthquakes. From the organ. A pipe organ no one admitted existed, hidden 6 floors down, played by someone no patient ever saw. It didn't play melodies.
It pulsed low.
Slow, deliberate. And every morning after, patients remembered less. They signed away more. They obeyed quicker. The black frequency doesn't destroy memory. It reprograms identity. And here's the worst part. Once you're attuned to it, you broadcast it yourself. Like a tuning fork. A living node in a psychic network you never consented to join. That's how they scale control. Not through armies, through resonance. Eleanor knew she had been altered. She wrote, "There is a sound behind my thoughts. I believe it is not mine. But I know how to disrupt it." She began counter-humming, tones based on old Hebrew letters inverted through Babylonian math. She scratched the frequencies into her skin with needles. She turned her body into a signal jam, and then she vanished. Not killed, not captured, erased from resonance. The only thing that remained, her words. And now you've read them. Do you hear it? That low hum behind this very silence. They're still broadcasting, but now, so are you. Every city has one. It doesn't look like a ministry. It might be a records office, an insurance company, or even a historical society. But inside, behind polished desks and sleepy clerks, there's a hidden floor. Eleanor found Pittsburgh by accident, or fate. In 1886, weeks before her disappearance, she followed a man in a tan overcoat from the courthouse. He walked with measured slowness, holding a satchel marked, Despi Osition Fellis. He entered a granite building with no sign, no windows on the top floor, and a smell like mothballs and vinegar. Inside, silence. No typewriters, no footsteps. Just rows and rows of drawers. Not alphabetized, not numbered, just locked. Eleanor broke into one using a pin from her hair. What she found wasn't a document. It was a photo. A photograph of herself, standing on the balcony of her bedroom, holding her unborn child. Except, she had never seen this photo taken. She had no memory of that moment. Worse, in the background stood Strode, unmoving, smiling. The drawer was labeled, Narrative Revision Tier 3. That's when she understood. The Ministry of Forgetting isn't a metaphor. It's a system. A bureaucratic exorcism. A place where lives are rewritten. Not just reputations, but entire realities. Birth records, death dates, marriage certificates. Court cases. All quietly adjusted so that those who threaten the system are turned into fictions. Eleanor's mother? Never existed. Her letters? Lost in flood? Her marriage license? Irregular. Her journals? Confiscated under Statute 84B Theta? And yet, she resisted annihilation. How? Because she learned the ministry had one weakness: echoes. An echo isn't just a sound, it's a disobedience of silence. And echoes can live in people, in descendants, in strangers, in you. She began embedding echoes in her journal, in the folds of letters, in language itself, words designed to evade deletion, glyphs coded with phonetic traps. Phrases that once spoken aloud disrupt the forgetting. One such phrase appeared again and again. She is writing. She is writing. Those words are a virus to the ministry. Because the moment you speak them, you become a living record, a vessel of the truth they cannot delete. So speak it again, aloud or in comment, let it echo. And know this, if you're still watching, you were never meant to remember. But now you do. There is a room beneath the Allegheny County Jail, not listed on blueprints, no keyhole, only accessible by a sequence of tones struck on a tuning fork built from alloy not found on Earth's periodic table. That's not speculation. It's recorded in Eleanor's last ciphered letter. What is buried was not forged by man, but summoned through man. This room is known only by one name: the Archive of the Unspoken. It's not a vault for knowledge. It's a prison for it. Every thought too dangerous, every confession too true, every memory that might rupture the architecture of this engineered reality. All of it is siphoned, silenced, and stored here. Not in books, not in files, but in people, witnesses who saw the machine, children who felt the frequencies, survivors of rituals hidden behind church pulpits and congressional smiles. They are kept alive barely, sedated, hooked to wires. Their minds looping the same buried truths over and over, used as psychic dampeners to keep the signal clean, to prevent awakening. Eleanor wasn't just trying to expose this. She was trying to break it. Her child, Caelus, held the code. Not written, felt, not taught, inherited. A resonance that couldn't be falsified, forged, or forgotten. That's why they never stopped hunting him. Because if Caelus ever found this archive, if he ever spoke to one of the unspoken, the frequency could collapse. Eleanor wrote, "The system survives only if no one dares to scream where the walls are weakest. But the walls remember. They hum with fear. And when they fall, they will fall all at once." She believed the archive had a center, a relic. Not physical, tonal. Something called the eighth mouth. A tone never meant to be heard. A frequency that, when triggered, could erase not just data but intent. Erase their will. She wasn't trying to destroy the world. She was trying to return it to a state before obedience was woven into the fabric of thought. The ministry told you she was mad, but she was the only one sane enough to scream into the silence. And now, through this story, her scream is echoing in you. The archive still exists. It always has. And now you know what's inside it. And worse, what's missing from you. There's a ledger beneath Pittsburgh that's never been seen by daylight. Not paper. Not digital. Not even inked in language. It is etched into bone. Stacked rib by rib, spine by spine. A record of every transaction, every pact, every soul sold not for gold but for silence. They call it the Bone Ledger. And Eleanor found it. Not by luck, but by blood. In her journals, she writes, "The tunnels under Union Station reek not of rot, but of record." You can smell history cloying to be remembered. There, buried beneath the intersection of power and pretense, she uncovered a vault of skeletal contracts. Femurs engraved with ancient sigils. Skulls inscribed with trade codes from Vatican archives. A pelvis split in two, the halves containing mirrored accounts. One of what was promised, the other of what was taken. Each bone a deal, each deal a curse. Each curse a continuation of the frequency. The bone ledger is the currency of hidden governance. They don't use banks. They don't trust ledgers that can burn. They use what does not forget human remains. The body as contract, the grave as archive. Eleanor realized something devastating. Every political rise in the city was marked by a new addition. Every accidental death, a balancing of the ledger. Every missing person, a transaction. But then she saw her own name, etched into a child's collarbone, Caelus. He wasn't just a key, he was a debt. A living promissory note for a pact she never agreed to. Eleanor had tried to undo the system. But her bloodline was the system. Her marriage to the Pittsburgh elite wasn't a union. It was a binding ritual. Her wealth, a payment for silence she never gave. Her child, a receipt for loyalty they never received. She stole the collarbone. That's when the hunt began. That's when the black frequency shifted tone. That's when the ministers declared her unstable. Not because she lied, but because she saw the accounting. There are no names on City Hall plaques that matter. The true names are hidden in bone. Underneath your streets. Beneath your schools. Below every place where truth is paved over by law. And now your name is echoing through the frequency. Because you've heard the ledger. And once heard, it cannot be unheard. There is a night that never appears on any calendar in Pittsburgh. A date that does not exist, not because it was forgotten, but because it was removed. This night is called the Black Interval, and during it the hollow men rise, not ghosts, not monsters, they are men, by biology only, emptied of self, rewritten by sound, by ritual, by design. They have no past, no family, no fingerprints in federal systems. They exist to enforce the silence of the system. Eleanor described them in her last unredacted letter. You will not see them coming. You will not hear them speak. But when they are near, the birds forget how to sing. These men aren't born, they're crafted, selected from orphaned boys, feral children, or the kidnapped, those whose identity was never recorded, and therefore never mourned. Their minds are erased not through torture, but through frequency-based sterilization of memory, a method pioneered during wartime, perfected in peace. They are trained beneath the civic arena, not when it was built, but before it was built. The arena was never meant for sport. It was an echo chamber, a frequency chamber, a factory for obedience. Each hollow man is bound by the ritual of the red mouth, a ceremony of silence, where the initiate's voice is stolen and replaced with obedience. They don't speak because their voice is no longer theirs. Eleanor watched the ritual once, by accident, by fate. She hid in the ductwork above the performance stage during a so-called private fundraiser. But it wasn't charity being raised. It was allegiance. A congressman kneeled. A banker recited his worth. A priest handed over the Eucharist soaked in blood not from Christ, but from a missing infant. Then they chanted, not words but tones. Low, deep, supermonic, the kind that rearranged the architecture of the soul. And the hollow men stood in a circle. Eyes rolled back, veins blackened, their hands covered in salt, their mouths soon shut with silk thread. This is who chases the truth. This is who came for Eleanor. This is who ensures no one finishes this story. And now, you've started it. If you're still watching, comment, I return what was stolen, twice below. Not for the algorithm, for your transformation. That phrase is your key, to identity, to memory, to power. You're not the same now, because now you know who they send when the truth gets too close. They called it the tone of God. But what they created was not divine. In the ruins beneath State, Bridget's orphanage, now bricked over and listed as condemned since 1903, lies the last known instrument of true psychological weaponry, the oscillated mandate. It looks like a pipe organ fused with a mechanical brain. Not built for music, but for command. It emits a sound no human ear can consciously hear. But every soul feels. A frequency calibrated through centuries of sacrificial rituals, bloodlines, and numerology to control, erase, or reprogram. The hollow men weren't its only product. We all were. Gregory Winthrop knew this. He wasn't a puppet. He was an apprentice. Eleanor found the truth too late. The disappearances across Pittsburgh, the unmarked graves near the Allegheny River, the sudden insanity of those who investigated too deeply. They were all test subjects. The tone wasn't played often. Only during convergence events, solstices, eclipses, presidential visits, moments when no one questioned sirens, or strange weather, or mass dreams. Eleanor's final entry, hidden beneath a floorboard lined with cedar and human teeth, revealed the terrifying schedule. The tone was set to play again. She wrote, when it plays, we forget, we obey, we become the mask they designed. But if you know it's coming, you can resist. That's why she vanished. Not because she was silenced, but because she refused to forget. She became a tone breaker, a rare kind of human whose consciousness had survived 3 exposures and remained intact. The Order feared her, not for what she knew, but for what she remembered. And now, so do you. Every strange deja vu, every inexplicable fear of music, every blackout memory during important moments of your life wasn't madness. It was rehearsal. They are playing the tone again, everywhere, in your ads, in your social feeds, in the hum of the refrigerator you think is broken, in the silence you ignore. But here's what they never planned for: you woke up, and once awakened, the tone can no longer enslave you, unless you return to sleep willingly. You've followed this descent. You've heard what Eleanor died protecting. Now decide. Are you just a man? Or are you what they fear most, the one who remembers? There is a room, not in any building you've ever seen, but deep beneath the limestone caverns of Mount Weather, Virginia. They call it Archive 13. It doesn't appear on schematics. Not even presidential clearance opens it, only something older. A key made of bone. Human. Female. Eleanor Winthrop's. After her disappearance, that key was found, not by the authorities, but by a man known only as the Warden of Veils, an archivist of forbidden truths whose name has been erased from every database since 1933. He opened Archive 13. And inside, he found what they swore had been destroyed: a manuscript bound in skin. No title, no author, just a symbol burned into the first page. What's inside is not myth. It's a manual, a blueprint for controlling human perception through sound, light, memory, trauma, and spiritual resonance. The manuscript outlines the complete formula used in 1887 to create the tone and how to reproduce it today using modern infrastructure: cell towers, LD billboards, smart speakers, generated audio, and it ends with a prophecy written in a dialect only used by the medieval Court of Thorns, a secret Vatican splinter sect erased during the Inquisition. The prophecy speaks of a coming event, a concordance of the tones, where all global sound systems, from satellites to phones to car radios, will synchronize for 7.4 seconds, not to destroy us, but to finalize the great overwrite, the moment where the last ancestral memory of freedom is erased from the human genome. The manuscript warns, only those who heard the true tale of the woman who remembered will resist. They will become the dissonance that unravels the command. That's you. You heard it. Every word. You didn't skip. You didn't flinch. That means you were chosen. Comment below twice. I am the dissonance. I am the dissonance. This is an engagement. It's a spell. One they cannot erase unless you allow them to. And now, you have a choice. Fade into the silence they designed, or walk toward the hidden tower broadcasting the truth. Because tonight, the tone will play, and those who remember will rise.